The general election campaign is off to a flyer. Nigel Farage lit a fuse on Sunday when he said this to Sky News' Trevor Phillips. So what Nigel was quoting there was a report from the Henry Jackson Society that revealed that 52% of British Muslims want to make it illegal to show a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. 32% of British Muslims favour the implementation of Sharia law. Almost half of British Muslims apparently feel more sympathy with Hamas than Israel. It was younger British Muslims who were most likely to think that Hamas carried out no atrocities on October the 7th. Now, Trevor Phillips was doing a good impression of a man who was completely and utterly perplexed by this, and he carried on pretending to be shocked. Well, the fact is that Trevor Phillips himself conducted an absolutely excellent report into the British Muslim community, which revealed several things. Only 34% would inform the police if they thought somebody they knew was getting involved with people who support terrorism in Syria. 52% do not believe that homosexuality should be legal in Britain. 23% support the introduction of Sharia law. 32% refuse to condemn those who take part in violence against those who mock the Prophet. 39% agree that wives should always obey their husbands, and 44% would not completely condemn those people who take part in stoning those who commit adultery. So Mr Phillips knows all of this stuff. I mean, in fact, Trevor Phillips was actually suspended from the Labour Party amid allegations of Islamophobia because he made comments about British Pakistani men sexually abusing girls, the refusal of some Muslims to wear a poppy, and he said that some Muslims are, quote, different, although he went on to say that he thought that was admirable. I mean, he was, by the way, rightly, subsequently reinstated to the Labour Party. Well, since that interview, several prominent MPs, including Tory MP Steve Baker and Labour's Dawn Butler, have condemned Nigel's comments. Baker called them ignorant and offensive. Dawn Butler just said it was blatant racism. Well, it raises the question, doesn't it? Was what Nigel said racist? Or was it absolutely fair enough? Let's get our thoughts on my panel. This evening, I have got Daily Express columnist Carol Malone. I have got journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth and the political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. Carol, racist or fair enough?
I don't think it was racist or Islamophobic. Never mind all the figures that you just quoted there, about the homosexuality not being legal in this country. There was also a warning that 46% of British Muslims say that we shouldn't have homosexual teachers in this country either. It's not acceptable. Think about what I'm thinking about the Muslims that don't who don't want to adhere to British values. I'm not talking about the majority, I'm talking about a sizable minority. We're talking about those communities where Sharia law is practiced, a law that completely disenfranchises women in this country. Let's talk about the honour killings that go on in this country, which have increased 82% in the last 5 years. Honour abuse has increased by 82% in the last 5 years. Honour killings have increased. We have between 12 and 15 a year. We have female genital mutilation still happening in this country. None of these things fit in with British values. They are totally against British values, and most of them hurt women in some which way. So for me, it's to accuse him of Islamophobia or being racist for pointing out that there are different values. I don't think it's just among the young particularly. I think it's among older Muslims. You had a cleric on this programme not too very long ago who said it was justifying why it's OK for men to have sex with 13-year-old girls.
Yeah, it was astonishing. Well, one of the things that I will say about that Nigel Farage-Trevor Phillips exchange is that I do think that if Nigel had come with the fact that Trevor Phillips' own report had published, then that probably would have helped him out a bit in that situation. Benjamin, are you considering this to be racist, or do you think that this is actually fair enough? And maybe for the first time we've got a quote-unquote mainstream British politician saying this stuff in the run-up to an election?
I think there are two different things here. One is that I think telling a group of people that othering them, that they are on the outside, that they don't have British values, does nothing to solve the problem of lack of integration. I find it odd that when we, obviously the views that some Muslims hold on gay people are wrong. I clearly disagree with them. But it's also the case that only a week or 2 weeks ago, there was a poll that found that well over a third of over 70s in this country believe that being gay is wrong. And yet most of those are likely to be white and maybe Christian, and nobody says that they lack British values. So I think sometimes it's rather unconstructive.
We would say that. I mean, you're saying that people would not say. I think the majority of people in this country would say that was not right.
Well, I mean, I'd be amazed. I'd be amazed if any politician went on a programme in a general election and said to those 70-year-olds that you don't have British values because you think being gay is wrong. I bet you they wouldn't have that backbone. But let me make the other point, which is that there is a problem with extremism in Islam in this country, and we have failed to stand up to those people. And one of the worst things about the fact that we failed to stand up to them is when, for example, you have people in Batley or in Birmingham that are lecturing teachers, are lecturing politicians and police and telling them what to do. They are letting down all the other Muslims that are moderate and trying to have their voices heard.
All right, now I'm just going to introduce a clip here, and this is the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. I believe that she's in Ashton, and she appears to be trying to appease a group of Muslim voters who, as I understand it, were formerly Labour voters but may not be anymore. I'm very intrigued to see what you all make of this.
Now, I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it. Only last week, the Labour Party were supporting the ICC. The Conservatives didn't support the ICC. So at this general election on that issue, we can't affect anything when we're not in government. And if Labour get into power, we will recognise Palestine.
So she said quite a lot there. James, I'll bring you in here on this now. I mean, is that just simping for votes?
I think it shows perhaps the extent to which Labour is concerned about the problem post-Gaza with certain sections of their kind of traditional core vote here. Ashton-under-Lyme is where George Galloway chose to launch his Workers' Party, a campaign, I think, last week. Angela Rayner has a majority of just around 4,000 or so. So what Angela Rayner was there saying, I think, was something that the Labour Party has been trying to get across, which is that actually, you know, may have come late to a ceasefire, but we will support it within Parliament. And I think it really shows the concern that Labour has around traditional Labour voters who are Muslim who might have deserted the party post-7th of October. Yeah,
I wonder, though, Carol, when you look at that, whether or not that's a little indication of what we might get under Labour, which is, you know, the total appeasement of the quote-unquote Muslim vote.
Well, you know, Angela Rayner has also self-interest here because George Galloway said he was going to put a candidate up against her, that he had a candidate ready to go against her. So in her case, it's self-preservation. But, you know, we can't pretend, you know, Ben alluded to that, we can't pretend there isn't a problem in this country with a sizable minority of Muslims who really do not like what we stand for. You know, we have schools operating in this country, you know, in Muslim schools where, you know, boys and girls are segregated. We have Muslim organisations that support segregation and blasphemy laws. That is not in tune with British values, and yet we don't attack them. We're not allowed to attack them. If that was happening in a Christian community or a Jewish community, it would be attacked, and it isn't. And we're not allowed to criticise Islam in the way other religions are criticised.
Okay. Benjamin, what do you make of what we saw from Angela Rayner there?
I mean, look, I think the idea that Labour is seriously threatened by Muslims not continuing to vote Labour is massively overstated. Because the Muslim populations are heavily populated, heavily concentrated in about 40 constituencies, which have large Labour majorities. So there's a very small number that are likely to not be Labour if they don't vote that. But I actually think the fact that at past elections 60 or 70% of British Muslims vote Labour shows that they are integrated in mainstream British society. Because the Labour Party has been socially liberal for 25 years, and most Muslims clearly know what they're voting for, and they vote for that party because they're willing to compromise on different things if they might not necessarily agree. I think that the fact that Muslims vote Labour is an endorsement of modern Britain.
I think there is also legitimate concerns about things like what we saw in the Rochdale branch of the Labour Party there, what was going on with the comments that were made quite openly, which led to the suspension of the candidate back at the beginning of February, Ali, and I think that shows perhaps that in certain areas of the Labour Party there is concern about what's going on there.
OK.
Well, wasn't there a recent poll that said a massive percentage of Muslims were deserting Labour because of their stance over Gaza? You might know the details of that more than me.
Well, I think there was some polling out at the end of last year about it, and I think that if you do talk to Labour MPs, they're certainly very concerned about that.
Yeah.
But the West Midlands mayoral election, where Labour quite surprisingly beat Andy Street, that is a very considerable Muslim population, and still the Labour Party was victorious.
I agree with you, but a considerable number of that population voted for Ahmed Yaqub, who
about 10%.
Yeah, well, that's large. And he's standing in Birmingham Ladywood, which is, I believe, Shabana Mahmood's constituency, who initially, I think, abstained from a ceasefire vote. And there's a huge Muslim population there. He is running with the campaign literature of him stood in front of a Palestinian flag. That I think, for many people, might be a concern.